it cannot be just storytelling. There has to be fundamental business potentially to be built or already built, and it's only then that the people will be willing to believe you.
Let's now talk a little bit about your decision to quit investment banking. At what point do you feel that you have reached a level where there is a stop button that you need to press in your life, right? Whether it's because you're burnt out, whether it's because you want to take new challenges, whether it's because you see that there is not much to learn from a particular place. When do you know that it's time to stop?
I think one of the things that I always realize in my life is that the only constant in life is change, right? I think having worked in investment banking for 8 years, I knew the skills of the trade, that this is happening and this is how an IPO works, this is how an M&A deal works, right? But at some point in time, large corporations and even investment banks are large corporations where everything is a hierarchy driven, right? Everything is a step function that, okay, you do this, then you achieve this, there is a lot of politics going on. But at the end of it, every job that you do is a marketing job, it's a sales job, right? You need to either sell yourself as a person, or you're selling a product, right? Or it's a service, right? So marketing is, I think, one of the key skills that anybody should have, whether you before even learning finance, right? So I realized very soon that in investment banking that there is a certain path set for me, that if I work in 5 years or 3 years as a VP, I can become an AVP or an SVP, and then potentially become an MD, right? But I think I realized that what do I enjoy in this entire exercise? I realized that meeting clients, talking to companies, understanding how they work is something I really enjoy a lot. And also the other aspect was that for investment banking side, we are always on the fence. That you are advising people, you're telling them how M&A works. Once you do the deal, then you move on to the next deal, right? But for me, what was important was how did the deal happen? How did the deal perform after it happened, right? So I decided that, hey, I think I have spent good amount of time honing this skill set. Let me get on the other side and learn something new things, because I think it's always important for me to learn new things, and that is what I enjoy most. If I am not learning or doing something interesting, I just get bored out of it. That's just me. So I decided back in 2019 that, hey, I've spent 8 years, let me use that knowledge to go to the corporate side, and potentially I can use that knowledge to bring some good capital efficiencies if some possible, but also learn what happens after you do an M&A, or how do you decide that, yes, I need to do an M&A, and what is the impact on both the buyer and seller after that M&A happens. So that's when I decided to go to the corporate side.
Okay, so you have seen a lot of these M&As, and you've been part of some of probably very big deals that we can't disclose right now for obvious reasons. But let's talk about the funding space in India right now. How do you see that space changing in the last 4 or 5 years that you have stopped working in an investment bank? What exactly do you think has changed over this particular period? Do you think that any significant changes happened because of the technology or the involvement of a lot of new people coming into the system, or do you think we are going back in time when things were in a certain kind?
No, I think the good thing that you've seen over the last 6-7 years is that a lot of new companies started coming, startups are coming out. Right? If you think around 8, 9, 10 years back, I would have only heard about like 1 or 2 startups coming from India which are achieving scale. But now I think people, what has happened is from a youth standpoint, people are willing to take those kind of risks, right? And back in my day, the aspirations were limited to becoming a doctor or an engineer, or going down a government path route, right? Now I think with a lot of the information coming in, the geo wave coming in, and a lot of things, people's aspirations have changed. People want to take that risk. People are okay to give it a shot and then see, okay, if it didn't work out, then I can do something else, right? Which was not the case when I was studying, right? Everybody had a set path. Startups coming in, a lot of attention started coming in to the Indian ecosystem by the VCs and the capital providers, as you want to call it, right? Which at least gave people the assurance that, hey, I don't need to really work without a salary or work without put in my own money for the longest time. There are people who will help me in this entire journey, right? That amount of confidence, when you see 1 or 2 success stories, everybody started getting pulled into it, right? Which has, I think, really a great story for India, because One of the key things that started happening up, I think at good 4 or 5 years back, was that a lot of people started focusing away from China. Like earlier, China was the center point for everybody to invest. If they had to look at Asia, China was one place that everybody wanted to spend time and resources in. But now I think India became that kind of a hub, and I think technology has played a great part, right? Indians have always been very motivated to on technology, math, very good with languages, and that kind of things you don't find in China, right? Yeah. From a language standpoint, Indians are much more palatable to speak in English than versus the Chinese, right?
Correct.
So I think those kind of key things in terms of having the right kind of access to technology, your demographic dividend, and people being strong in tech languages really helped a lot of global companies to set shop in India. Then the capital providers started coming in and then started funding a lot of these small ventures, right? And people, like, then the risk-taking attitude just dramatically changed.
It's great that we are talking about startups while being at the startup capital, and that too in the office that is in startup that is making strides. Now let's talk about funding little bit in detail as to how it works. So for example, for a startup, what is the step one for it to raise capital? How does a particular startup know that it's ready for a funding round? And how do people who are willing to put money understand that this particular startup has potential and we should back it up?
Right. So I think there are different stages of a startup, right? There could be an early stage startup, there is a growth stage startup, and then there's a late stage startup, right? So the dynamics are very, very different in all the three stages. At the very early stage, where you say a seed or a pre-seed or those kind of rounds, where it's an idea of the founders, right? Of the individual, that hey, this is what we want to, this is the problem we want to solve, this is how we want to solve it, and this is the potential market which is available. So it's at that time you don't have a lot of concrete evidence that yes, this is something that we will be able to achieve, or maybe you have launched something and you've seen very, very early positive signs, right? So at that time it's more about the storytelling. What is the problem you're solving, and why you're so passionate about it? Because from an investor side, they are trying to see whether are you somebody who will dedicate 10 to 15 years of your life towards solving this problem. Okay. That's the key indicator, and for that they may see what background you may have, whether you're coming from somewhere where you have managed a team, or how committed you are from an idea perspective, and do you have the operational expertise, or at least the expertise to hire people who have the operational expertise, right? I think those are the key indicators that people or a VC look at, right? A lot of people may have a very different view. Hey, this is a very small industry, I don't see a big outcome coming in. Or some people may just say, hey, I think this is a great idea. You may not be the largest player that will develop it, but this could be a good business to build it, right? So it's all about the founder's vision and the storytelling. The storytelling and the mission and may or may not have remained the same that you started with. It may have pivoted and you've done something else, but still it is always about the vision, what you're trying to build in. But there at least the idea is that you have achieved PMF or a product market fit, and then the story is also collaborated with the kind of numbers that you can show from either it is revenues or the kind of users who have downloaded or the monetization that you've achieved, or the kind of margins the unit economics, right? It's all about the unit economics that falls into picture. And then it's the late stage where you're saying that hey, I've already set a business, I've disrupted this market, and I could ideally go for an IPO, or I can find a strategic who can buy this. But this is a business which is set. I just need the capital for purely for growth and making sure that I achieve profitability. So I think one has to be very clear at what stage you are in and why you want to raise. And I guess once you're clear on that, and then you can work backwards to do the next kind of steps, whether you want to reach out to VCs or you want to prepare a data room, and those kind of different aspects come into picture.
Do you think most of the startups in India, they're more of storytellers or doers?
So I think you have to be a combination. There could be a situation where, like in a good market, you can be the storyteller and you can get loads of funding, right? But eventually you have to think around investors. So you don't have to think around capital. You have to think around whether this kind of a partner, if I bring on board, they will be asking me a lot of questions. I'm responsible to them. Right? If I'm responsible to them, it cannot be just storytelling. There has to be fundamental business potentially to be built or already built, and it's only then that the people will be willing to believe you. You should not think about a startup being only like a 3, 4, 5 year journey, right? You have to be committed to the idea. Because for example, for me also, there was a stage where I was contemplating, but then I realized that, hey, I have not found a compelling idea where I can dedicate 10 to 15 years of my life to that idea. Correct. Right? So I think you need to be that strong-willed that, hey, I want to spend the next decade doing this, right? And with the people that I want to do this with. So I think that's where I think every external stakeholder, whether it is your investor, your clients, or for that matter anybody, they will look at those kind of things for you. So you can be good storytellers, but I think you have to be good with execution.
So Anubhav, you actually have given a lot of advice with, again, pardon my wordplay, with your Anubhav, and you have given a lot of advice to these startups as well, with respect to when they should probably get into the entire deal of funding, and they should be raising money, where they should be focusing on certain elements in their business to grow, right? What probably would be your advice to an early stage startup, growth or profitability?
Right. I think at an early stage, I think you have to focus only on growth, because it's all about finding the right product market fit. For a startup, profitability question comes in once at a much later stage, when you know that there is demand for your product. But first, to establish that demand, you have to focus on growth. At maybe a growth, when you are at a growth stage or at a late stage, then I think the questions on profitability are much more important. So I think just to give you an example, right? If you think around Kuku FM, right? So maybe 2 years back when we started monetization, I think for the last till earlier this year, we were completely focused on growth, because we were the kind of a very a player who's focused only on audio. We are trying to become the largest audio platform in India, and I think it was important to establish to the market that, hey, this is the product that people want, and even to us, right? So once you have achieved that product market fit, that there is a demand for this kind of a product, only then you should start focusing on other metrics. Obviously, the intention is you are not burning a lot of money, but growth is the key fundamental principle that it is important for the company and for any external stakeholder, right? Because that's where it shows that, yes, there is a customer who's willing to pay for it. Once you have established that, you have established a good business model, what are your potential margins, how do you acquire a customer, what are your key acquisition channels, what are your growth channels, I think then it's time to focus on the next stage, where you are looking at some sort of profitability. It may or may not be net income profitability, but at a gross margin level, or at a contribution margin level, or just before marketing, after marketing, are you profitable? Because that gives a sign that on a unit basis, the company or a platform is profitable or not. And I think as you start growing significantly, it is then to prove to yourself that, can I make this business a much larger kind of business, where you are not dependent on external capital. So today at Kuku FM, I think we are at that stage where we want to achieve that profitability much sooner, right? We are comfortable with the amount of money that we have raised. We know that we have a much long runway for us, but we want to make sure that the company is growing. Every rupee that is spent, there is profitability attached to it. So that's how the entire the company is being built. That's what people are thinking about. That's the kind of ethos that we want to build for the company today, that, hey, we want to focus on, we would not deprioritize growth, but we want to become a profitable company much sooner.
Okay. What is the flip side of raising money?
So I think the kind of expectations that come up, right? A lot of times it depends again on the stage of the business and external environment, but people have those kind of ambitions that, hey, you have raised so much money, you need to show X amount of growth every month, right? I think one thing at Kuku FM we are very much focused on is that we have to build a business. It should not be that there have been situations, and you keep reading them in the press, that people are just throwing money out for marketing, or just giving hugely discounts on products, and eventually there is no unit economics. There is just pure VC money coming in and going to customers, right? And I think that can give you short-term growth, but after a point of time, there is no business. Everybody can see through. So I think raising capital is a big responsibility, because you are putting basically putting the trust of somebody in your own hands, and you are basically showing to the world, hey, I've done this. I'll make sure I've made those kind of promises to you in terms of scaling this business, but also making sure that I'll achieve my key KPIs, and let's be the partners together and grow this business, right?